We are working our way through this project, but there's still a few steps left. In this video, I'm going to show you the inking step using illustration pens. Basically, we're just going to turn these pencil lines into a bunch of ink lines. I'm asking us to do this step for a few reasons. One, it's a new medium to experiment with and get better at using. Two, inking the artwork is really going to aid you in keeping nice crisp lines throughout the whole process of creating the artwork. So all the shapes and lines will be very crisp and clear and stand out really well. And three, it's going to help you do a better job with the next step in the process, which is to use watercolors. In the last project, we used watercolor pencils, and we can use watercolor pencils in this project as well, but primarily after this step, we're going to be using normal watercolors, from a palette, watercolor tray, and brush. And so having these pen lines are really going to help keep the divisions between different shapes and details very crisp and clear. It's kind of similar to how they make comic books. They do inking with comic book pages too. So they have lots of bold outlines. Okay, so now you know some of why we're using these illustration pens to outline all the lines that you see. Now let's talk a little bit about the how. So some of the tips to be most effective with this. When using these illustration pens, it's really important to practice your fine motor control. So like really being in control of what you're doing to make these lines. One of the ways to be in control of making these lines is to angle your paper in a way that allows you the easiest and most comfortable and longest range of motion with your wrist when you're making these lines. So you can see that I'm turning my paper quite a bit. It's because I'm trying to angle my paper in a way that allows me to use my hand to make these lines in the most comfortable way for me, so that I can have a nice smooth line and I can be in control of it. Usually the angle for me to do that in is where the lines are coming pretty much straight down towards me. If I'm moving my pen to the side, I really don't have a lot of control. Like, it's very easy for me to wander off of the line. But if I can angle my paper so that the lines are coming down towards me, I have a lot more control. Another thing that I did with this project that I would probably recommend that you do as well is I tackled a lot of the really long straight lines first, just because those are going to be the hardest and I wanted to get them out of the way. They're the hardest because they're the lines that are going to have the mistakes that show up the most. So if you make a mistake, you're going to see them the most easy on those long lines. So if I were to make a really bad mistake, I could still start over and I wouldn't have done that much extra work. So I try to get those long straight lines out of the way first. Another important tip when you're doing these long lines is when you're doing the long lines, only go as far as is comfortable for your hand to go. If your hand is having a hard time continuing to move along further and make that line further, then it's best to really stop. So stop before it gets uncomfortable to keep making that line. And then move your hand into a new comfortable position and pick up where you left off. I already told you the step that we're going to do after this. We're going to be practicing and improving our skills using watercolor paint in order to fill it all in and bring it to life with color. But then there's another step after that. And it's kind of important for you to understand what that step is a little bit so that it can inform you about how you should tackle and try to do well with this step right now. So after we're done with the watercolor paint, we're going to go back and use the illustration pens some more. We're going to do that for a few reasons. One, it's going to allow us to strengthen and highlight some of the details a little bit better. Two, we're going to use the pens to do a little bit of shading by varying the type and thickness of lines, as well as filling in little areas for shadows. And three, it's nice to just vary the thickness and type of lines for an increased interest level in the artwork. Just to vary those lines makes it more interesting. So if you're pretty comfortable using the illustration pens, you could start doing some of that stuff right now during this step. But if you're not very comfortable using the illustration pens, then your goal should really just be to make lines that are very even, very straight, and very consistent. Alright, so that does it for this video demonstration for this step in the process. As always, I hope you have fun and good luck.